CCPA. We've been hearing a whole lot about it, but we don't know exactly what it is, or at least I don't. So we're here with Mitch and Ray from Cybersecurity LLC. Gentlemen, thank you. Let's start off. What is it? CCPA.
So CCPA is a law which was passed last year, and there's a lot of story behind it, but it is probably going to be the benchmark model for every other state. In California, where things always happen first, they passed this law called the California Consumer Privacy Act. And what CCPA does is it gives consumers new privacy rights. That's a concept which has not, before this law was passed, has not existed in the United States. So for example, you have a right for people not to sell your data. You have a right to not be discriminated in terms of service that the company is providing if you don't want your data sold. You have a right to a copy of your data. These are new things. Now, this exists in Europe under the General Data Protection Regulation, but this is the first time this has existed in the United States. After that law was passed in California, 10 other states were currently in this past legislative session looking at similar laws, and some other laws were passed, nothing as dramatic as California, but it's likely that this will be the benchmark for a number of other states over the next few years. What does that mean to business? Well, it means if you have customers who are based in California, you now have to be ready to respond to customers requesting things under these rights. So if a customer requests a copy of their data, you need to be able to respond within 45 days. Now, if you're the corner bakery, you probably don't have, and you're in Colorado where we are, you probably don't have customers in California. If you're an online business of some sort, you likely do have customers in California. California by itself is the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. So it's likely that you have customers in California. So CCPA affects you even if you are not located in California.
I'm going to approach this a little bit differently for everybody. CCPA. There's something big going on in the world, and it potentially will affect every one of us. Anyone watching this will affect it. Non-authoritarian governments in the world are in the process of trying to grant their citizens a new set of rights. That's a big statement, a new set of rights. These are your data rights. Heretofore, in the United States right now, you do not own your own data. You don't own it. That's why Google, Twitter, Facebook, they'll give you their application to use, and they will charge money for it and make a fortune off it. You get nothing. You get to use their little social media platform. Big whoop, okay? Which is just an intrusion in your life, all right? But in Europe, European citizens, because of the GDPR that Mitch just meant, General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, the European citizens own their data now. They own their data. We're talking about artificial in the United States, the CCPA, the California started off granting their citizens ownership of their data. Being copied. Okay, there's going to be a big fight about this. Google, Facebook, they're already in Washington trying to do a national privacy law, which is weakened down from the California law. Are we going to go along with that? Depends on you as the citizens, okay? But this is a big thing, and think about, you've been hearing about the big struggle around artificial intelligence and how it might be putting a lot of people out of work. Well, the futurists are thinking that citizens will be able to sell their data and get value from it, which may compensate for this artificial intelligence revolution and automation revolution that we're facing out there. So this is a big deal for the non-authoritarian governments in the world. Doesn't include China, doesn't include Russia, North Korea, and a bunch of other companies out there. They're not going to give their citizens these rights. They're going to take these rights and they're going to try to control their populations. Will we allow that to happen to us? Now, and the question that I hope you ask us next is, how hard is this going to be for businesses to implement this CCPA deal?
Well, I understand that there are a lot of ways or a lot of needs to comply with the CCPA regulations. How does an average business do that?
Well, if you're a typical business, there's stuff that you need to do, but it's not going to affect the business model. The reason why the Googles and Facebooks of the world are fighting this is because it affects the viability of their business model. So for every business, you need to go look at your business model, and if you don't have the ability to go off and extract data from people, if you don't have the ability to sell that data, does that affect your business model? Are you still going to be able to make a profit if the law changes? So that's the first thing you need to go look at. And I would say for most businesses, the primary function of the business is not to sell your customers' data. So from that perspective, that's probably okay, but there are certainly a lot of online apps and online websites where they don't charge the consumer, and therefore the consumer is the product that they're selling. And if that's true and you can no longer sell the data without the consumer's consent, then that affects your business model. Sure. So one of the things that the California Consumer Privacy Act requires is that every business put a link on their homepage of their website that says, I don't want you to sell my data. It has to be prominently displayed on the homepage. And then you obviously have to go off and honor that request if someone makes that request. Does that change your business model? So let's assume for the moment that it doesn't. Okay. What do you need to do? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out where your data is. Where is your data? And nowadays for most companies, data lives in the cloud. It lives in a lot of clouds. Right. It lives on servers inside the company. And most importantly, it lives on employees' phones and laptops and tablets. And if someone comes up and says, in accordance with the California Consumer Privacy Act, I want you to delete my data, which is one of the rights that they have, you have to know where the data is. So data mapping is certainly an early on problem you need to go solve. The next problem you need to go solve is you need to train your employees, because if you have an employee that has their own little database that they've created, and Ray comes to your company and says, I want you to erase my data, and Mitch has his own little pocket of data, and he continues to send information out to Ray, even though he said, I don't want you to do that anymore. Right. Now you're in violation of the law. So that's an interesting challenge, training employees. Creating policies and procedures is something that you need to do, including creating procedures for what I do when people make requests of me, when they make a request for a copy of their data, when they make a request to delete the data, when they make a request to not sell the data. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of basic things you need to do. It's really pretty workable for most organizations if their primary business model is not to sell your data.
So these two boomers have a business, Cybersecurity LLC, which is a cybersecurity and privacy company. So we are set up, we understand the privacy laws, we understand the issues associated with privacy, and we can help you comply with the law. And it does require some additional procedures, some additional training, some additional actions. But if we as a nation are going to insist that our government give us the control over our own data, over our own digital exhausts in this world, well, then we're going to have to insist that these companies, all these companies, follow suit and follow the new privacy laws that are coming down the pike.
One thing we're seeing, Ray, is important to point out is we're seeing a lot of companies who are going off and saying, so two things. We're seeing a lot of companies who have to comply with the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe saying, I understand, Ray, that you don't need to comply with that law, but if you want to do business with me, you will comply with that law. So that's one thing we're seeing. We're also seeing companies like Microsoft just announced recently that they plan to give CCPA style rights to every American citizen, no matter what state they live in. So we're going to see these big companies who are stretching the envelope and saying, in reality, it's very self-serving. It's easier for a company like Microsoft to go off and have a universal policy as opposed to trying to say, okay, if you're in Wyoming, I'm going to do this, and if you're in California, I'm going to do this. They're just going to say, we're going to give everybody these California-style rights. And now, if you don't do that, now you don't look as attractive to a consumer as a company that does.
Sure. Well, I don't know about you, but I definitely want my data rights protected. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the information. We appreciate it. So if you'd like more tips, go to their YouTube page or visit cybersecurity.com, and note that security is spelled with a C.